Hi, Ryan.
Hi, Savanah.
What are we talking about today?
Today we are doing an episode on Primas Picks, a new segment brought to you by your Prickly Pear Primas.
Hello from the future. If you're watching this right now, we are wearing something different than from the rest of this episode because this is a quick little side note to last week's episode. We were talking about Victorious. Just as a note, when we were discussing Nickelodeon and Drake and Josh, we did not touch on any of the issues with Drake Bell that have been presented at this time because at least I was not fully aware of them. I don't know how much Ryan was aware of them, but we did not talk about it, and we just want to acknowledge that we didn't talk about it because I could see why somebody might wonder why we did not discuss that. So just throwing it out there. We are aware. We didn't mention it though.
Yes. As always, thank you to our sponsors, our Patreons, anyone who watches this video, clicks on the video, watches it for 10 minutes. I know who you are. Thank you. I still appreciate you. We are doing a new segment today. So normally, if this is your first episode of this podcast, we kind of choose a cultural artifact, whether it be a movie, mainly movies and TV shows, books,
video games.
And we kind of talk about them from our perspectives, and we try to have a cultural and political take on them. But today, just to get to know you guys a bit better, and also to give ourselves a little bit of a break, we are doing this thing that I did not come up with. I actually kind of stole it from another podcast called Triple Click. Great podcast, highly recommend. And what they did was they kind of made a living list of their video game podcast, so they did video games, but we're going to do a living list of just anything that we would recommend that we think that you should watch, either to get us to know us better or play, that we want you to have that experience, or that we wish we could force this experience upon everyone in the lived world. That kind of vibe. But me and Savanah have kind of different tastes. But we're going to pitch each other kind of similar things. It could be a video game and a video game, or something in the teen genre that's a book up against something that's a teen genre that's a movie. And we're just going to whittle our choices down until we have a list of 10 that we can proudly state that we wholeheartedly recommend.
Yep, that's what we're doing.
That's what we're doing today. So we both I have a bracket of 24 in front of me that's unfilled, and we're both just going to take turns presenting our artifacts, and then we'll have a little discussion about what we think should make it through. Savanah, I happen to notice you're wearing a necklace.
Yes, I am.
I like it.
Thank you. I like yours as well.
Oh, I'm wearing a necklace too.
Yes. And if you like these necklaces, we will be having an Etsy shop where you can custom order necklaces such as this to say your name, any kind of phrase you would want. We got all kinds of fun Y2K inspired beads. The options are really endless. So if you would like to support us, the funds are for our podcast to help get this going, to help buy stuff, to make really cool episodes. If you want to help support us in that way, definitely check out our Etsy shop.
Anything else we need to go over before we dive right in?
I don't think so. I would just like to note that this is not an exhaustive list of our favorite things. For me personally, this has been really challenging to narrow down. So there are other things that we like, even if they're not on this list.
It wasn't that exhausting for me. I like a lot of things, and I honestly always recommend the same things to everyone, so it wasn't that hard for me.
It was hard for me.
So let's go ahead and start. And I'm just going to roll kind of an easy, slow ball down the middle, something that I think that we can kind of both agree on. And I am going to just put out there for an animated series, Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Do you want to give an explanation as to why you picked that?
Sure. I chose Avatar: The Last Airbender because it's a staple in my family of Martinez's. We all watch it. We all watched it from a young age. We all still talk about it. We love Legend of Korra. It's had such an impact on me and how I view Western animation and Eastern animation, which is kind of cool. I like how it's inspired from Japanese animation, and it's really made me appreciate just what children's shows can do. I just love children's media, and I appreciate the care that someone takes to put into something that doesn't talk down to their audience?
So on my original list, I did not have a children's animated show because I made a distinction, I guess, between children's animation and adult animation. But I would say that probably it would also be my top child animated
So
show.
you're proposing the same thing?
No, I'm going to propose something else. Because I'm going to propose a top animated adult show. I'm making that distinction. And my top choice would be Daria for that. I love Daria. King of the Hill is the close second. It was very hard to pick. But I really like that one specifically just because it is like centered on female characters and it doesn't like, in my opinion, fall onto like a lot of like stereotypes or things like that, especially considering for when it was made. I feel like it was pretty ahead of its time when it came out. And I always recommend it to people because I feel like not a lot of people have seen it as compared to like Beavis and Butthead or King of the Hill or any of the older like animated shows of that time. And I feel like as I've been like impacted by child animated shows, I feel like I've also been really impacted by adult animated shows. And I feel like I have a secret dream of one day like being rich just so I could produce one. I know I don't have the talent to like be on the team of making it, but I'd like to be able to produce one day.
I like BOJACK Horseman a lot, and that's probably my favorite adult animated TV show. So I just kind of want to throw that out there. Do you like Daria more than BOJACK Horseman?
I do, because I almost kind of feel like they're different shows. Like, to me, Daria is just like a comedy, whereas BOJACK Horseman is almost like a drama.
Yeah. They are kind of different shows, but I think they're both pretty... I mean, I haven't seen a lot of Daria. I just kind of have seen bits and pieces.
BOJACK Horseman, I will say, is a very, like, groundbreaking show, for sure.
But we're not talking about that.
No.
We're talking about who's making it next.
Yeah.
In our list. And I feel pretty strongly about my pick overriding yours. Avatar can always be replaced later, but I don't know, I haven't seen Daria, so it's hard for me to say.
Yeah, I mean, between those two, I think I would pick Avatar over Daria.
Well, Savanah said it, so I'm keeping it. All right, well, I'm filling out our bracket, which we'll post at the end here. Savanah, go ahead and present your next pick.
For this next one that I will propose, the category is top teen movie, specifically, and that is a distinction from something like a rom-com that has adults in it or something. Like, it is specifically about teens. And so my pick for that is Clueless, because I feel like culturally Clueless is so significant, and just the amount of things that it's inspired since it came out, and just all of like the trends really that like came from that movie. I mean, it's just also a very enjoyable movie to me.
Totally.
Yeah. And to me, I just really love that movie in particular because it's kind of like other things, like maybe closest to like Legally Blonde, where you have this character who is really pretty and she's the popular girl, but she's also really smart and she like sticks up for what she believes in and isn't just like cast aside, I guess. It's just being like a pretty face.
I have seen Clueless, so this will be a hard one for me. I am already feeling a little defensive and cagey around my pick for teen movie. And my pick is going to be Twilight.
I knew it!
Just what else can I say about Twilight? Sure, when it came out, the critical reception was nothing. But the popular perception of Twilight was either you loved it or you hated it. But now looking back on Twilight, I think everyone kind of understands that Twilight was just hated on because it was made and about by women. And I think that everyone kind of watches Twilight now, and there's just this kind of underlying humor that was, I think, purposeful and unpurposeful. And you just watch it now, and it makes you feel so happy and so good about being back in those times. And you relive all those moments from your childhood, like attending that weird birthday party that you went to where that girl kept track of all the times she read Twilight on her walls, and it just really brings me back.
Yeah. I mean, I guess to me, in my mind, like, I agree with everything that you said. To me, I view the books as being more of, like, the cultural moment versus the movies. I also just, like, think of them as, like, two different things in my head. Like, Twilight is more fantasy than Clueless being more real life, I guess. I don't know what you would call it.
I would view Clueless as more of an adult movie. I understand that they star teens, but I mean, they're not actually teens, but it's set at high school, but I would consider it more of an adult movie. Unlike other things like Ferris Bueller's Day Off or even The Breakfast Club, I would say is more aimed at teens, but Clueless has a very adult sense of humor to me.
I suppose. I definitely think it leans older on the side of adults, but I think that maybe adults... Actually, I'm not sure. I guess I just feel like perhaps Clueless has had a larger cultural impact versus the Twilight movies. I think the Twilight books had, like... Not that the movies didn't have an impact. Also, I just feel like Twilight isn't even, like, the best Twilight movie, like, in the franchise.
It might be. You haven't even seen all the movies.
I refuse to see Eclipse. I was one of those people where I was, like, really into the books, and then I didn't like the movie, and it made me really upset. But I still maintain that Breaking Dawn Part 1 is the best one in the franchise. So I'm still holding on for feeling like Clueless is over Twilight. Just because I think, too, unfortunately, like, as you said, like, people discount Twilight. I think a lot of people still do discount Twilight, and they would view Clueless as being more serious. And that's why it's more important to other people. I'm not saying that that's right. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying in the general population.
Okay. Which represents our brand more as a Prima?
I don't know. I guess probably, like, for me personally, for my personal brand, I'm maybe more inclined towards Clueless versus I feel like our podcast brand is more on the side of Twilight.
Interesting. Because I felt the other way around. I feel like my personal brand is more Twilight and the Prima's brand is more Clueless. This is very tough. We're spending a lot of time on this. We need to hurry up. Okay, I can agree with you that Twilight as just a movie itself is not as strong of a contender against Clueless as a movie.
Yeah.
So I will move Clueless forward.
Okay.
So I guess I get to present next, huh? I have an album here. I actually have two albums. I really couldn't decide. But I'm just going to pick one right now, and I'll give the other one an honorable mention. So for my album of choice for musicality is Carly Rae Jepsen's Emotion. Iconic album. Love it to death. I come back to it constantly. My honorable mention is Frank Ocean's Chanel Orange, which is another album that I'm always constantly going back to as well.
Interesting choices. I would not have expected those. So I picked as a category band, but I think that this could be extended to album My Chemical Romance. Because I think for myself and probably also Ryan, they had quite the impact on us in our life. And still to this day, I'm still very much a very big fan of My Chemical Romance. And they've both, like, impacted me with, like, their music, but also just, like, them as people, especially, like, Gerard Way as a person. He really, like, opened my eyes to so many things and was, like, talking about so many things that I didn't know anybody talking about. Like, he was talking about, like, being expressive with gender and experimenting with gender back in, like, I don't even know, 2005, like, before I knew anybody talking about that. And then just openly talking about, like, sexuality in a, like, non-judgmental way. And that to me, like, was very, like, groundbreaking, I guess, as a child and preteen to experience that. And just their cultural significance is very wide-reaching.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think that MCR has probably had a bigger impact on me than Carly Rae Jepsen overall as a whole. I mean, Emotion, I think you talk to anyone who has any kind of, like, popular music knowledge, and they will agree that Emotion is just pinnacle pop. You just can't get past it. And I think that it's a perfect album for its time and still so listenable and tolerable now. Like, even if I go back and I listen to Britney Spears, I'm kind of like, do I only like this for the nostalgia? Maybe a little bit. But I don't think Emotion. I think Emotion will age in perfection.
That's how I feel about My Chemical Romance. Like, I do not feel like it's dated when I listen to it versus some other music that was in that same, like, pop punk emo genre of that time. It definitely feels dated to go back to, and it definitely feels, like, purely nostalgic. Whereas My Chemical Romance is nostalgic because it was, like, the most important thing in my formative years of life. But it's just as like relatable and enjoyable to me today, if not sometimes more relatable today than it was before.
Yeah, for sure. I'll go ahead and put on MCR through Carly Rae. Anytime you want to be on the podcast, just let me know.
All right, so this is kind of a strange category, but I was getting into strange categories because I was having a hard time, as mentioned before. So this category is favorite TV show that is no longer running.
Oh, okay.
And so this for me would be Mad Men. Because as like cliche as that is, I feel like Mad Men as a TV drama for me to watch when I did, I truly felt like I hadn't ever seen anything like that before that was that compelling with the story and also just like the visual aesthetic and the costume design. I am a very visual person, and so that was always like one of the really, really big things to me that I really, really appreciated about the show. And I think that it's had a pretty lasting impact on TV. It's definitely, I think, one of the top TV shows of all time, probably, of dramas at least, of TV dramas. And I think it pushed the just like medium of TV shows like to the forefront. Like I feel like it was shows like Mad Men, The Sopranos, like all those shows that kind of came out in that like, I don't know, 10-year time period, really like pushed TV forward to be like better than movies at times.
It is the platinum age of television.
Yeah. So for me, Mad Men is kind of like the pinnacle of that. And I just love that time period, like in general. Like if I could go back in time, I'd probably go back in time to the 1960s.
Interesting.
Despite I know all the problems that were in the 1960s, I just like the aesthetic, okay?
If I could go back in time, I guess I would, but I would go like real far back.
Yeah.
And not to live, just to visit.
Yeah.
So the only thing on my list that fits your category that I still have left to present is Ouran High School Host Club. So we have Mad Men versus Ouran. Okay, so I'm gonna start by describing Ouran. It's an older anime that came out in the early 2000s that stars the main protagonist, Haruhi, who is a kind of androgynous looking female character. And she gets herself into some trouble when she knocks over a really fancy vase, and this vase belongs to the school's host club, which is kind of like a place where you go to hang out after school with usually very attractive men. Or so how it's portrayed in anime. And she breaks this vase, and she gets coerced into repaying that vase by becoming a member of this host club and presenting as male to their guests. And there's a whole bunch of shenanigans. All right, so I'm going to talk about Mad Men for a second.
Okay.
I did watch all of Mad Men, and it's not a show that really sticks with me. I think about it aesthetically, and I do really enjoy the aesthetic choices. I enjoy the acting. I love looking at everyone. But the overall story of Mad Men, besides that final episode, I don't reflect on and think about on a regular basis.
I will say that, like, the main story of Mad Men, of having this, like, tragic man-child who's, like, trying to figure out his life, like, I really detest that, like, storyline now that I've seen it so often.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. So there is that. I think for me, it just has, like, a nostalgic place of, like, feeling like when I watched it, I was like, wow, like, this is TV. And then also more nostalgia, or not nostalgia, I guess just like warm fuzzy feelings with the show, because I rewatched this series like maybe 3 or 4 times.
Oh, wow.
And one of those times was when I was moving to New York for the first time and like watching 1960s New York, and then going to New York and being like, wow, these are the buildings. Not that they actually filmed Mad Men in New York City. So you don't really see it there, but I feel like you can imagine the vibe. I mean, I almost feel like it's impossible to compare to Ouran High School Host Club just because they're so different. I mean, I know how Ouran High School Host Club, like, the way that it kind of, like, gender bends the harem, like, genre, I guess, is pretty innovative. But I'm not entirely sure of, like, the cultural impact, I guess, that Ouran High School Host Club has had widely over the anime community, I guess, maybe. Because a lot of times I feel like that's one of the animes that you get made fun of for liking. Maybe that's just me.
I think that's just you. I feel like Ouran is kind of a universal starting anime that a lot of people will start with, kind of along the lines of like Death Note or Fruits Basket, just kind of this starting anime, and it really takes that genre and it kind of bends it in an unexpected way, and I think it opens your mind up. I do think it's had impact on other shoujo mangas and shoujo animes. It really plays with gender, and I really like that, and it's a perfect gateway anime to introduce a Western audience into animation in Japanese anime. I will say I've watched a lot of video essays, and I feel like they bring up Breaking Bad a lot more than they do Mad Men.
This is true. This is true. I think I'm willing to concede and have Ouran go through, purely also just of the fact of like, at least it's like a non-Western thing, and Mad Men is not diverse.
No.
In like any way, shape, or form.
I'm moving Ouran forward. There's nothing you can do to stop me.
I'm not trying.
I do have a favorite rom-com here. So it's another movie pick. And my recent favorite rom-com, and it has a lot of its problems, but it's Love, Simon. So I first saw that movie in college in the theater with my friends, and it was a really nice experience, and I read that book as well. And the premise of that story, it's kind of like a Cinderella story starring Hilary Duff, if you've ever seen that one, but it's kind of like a masked identities kind of story between two lovers, and it's a gay twist. Pretty much. That's what I'm getting at here.
I have not seen Love, Simon.
Really?
I guess I would go with Cinderella story, like in that same vein. Just because honestly, that's probably like the rom-com, albeit it's kind of more, I would consider that more of like a teen rom-com versus like an adult rom-com, which sounds like Love, Simon is probably more so for teens as well.
Yeah.
And that is probably the rom-com that I've seen the most in my life. Like over and over and over again. And I've been to many a slumber party where we watched Cinderella story.
Yeah, I've also been to many a slumber party where we watched a Cinderella story, including where we watched the Cinderella story 2 starring Selena Gomez. It's a tough one. These are like both identical movies. I will say that Love, Simon is a bit problematic. It was written by Ali Becker-Talley, who is a straight white woman, which is not my favorite, but I understand wanting to write a cute little nice gay love story with a bow on top. I do.
I suppose that there are probably like issues with Cinderella's story.
Like its lack of diversity.
Yeah, and like Regina King being kind of like pushed to being like, I don't even know what you would call that trope. What would you call that trope? I don't know. It's a problematic trope. But it is very enjoyable. I feel like I still have not gotten tired of watching it.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Which one do you feel like has been like more culturally important, I guess? That's what we keep coming back to, I suppose.
I think neither, honestly. I do feel like Love, Simon really did spark something in the YA community at the time, just because it had a lot of success. And so I can name a lot of books that followed after that also kind of co-opted the idea of just like a light, fun rom-com, but gay.
Yeah. I feel like I don't even know. I'm sure there are women in my life who have not seen Cinderella story of our age, but I'm not sure I know any, truly. I feel like everyone always like references that movie or makes jokes about that movie, and that it's just really like an accepted part of like growing up.
And it has Hilary Duff in it, so if Hilary Duff isn't on this list, who are we?
Yeah.
Cinderella story is moving forward.
Okay.
I think it's your turn.
It is. So for this category, I have selected my favorite film production company.
Wow.
Yes. Which is A24. I have seen a lot of their movies. Typically, if I'm ever seeing a trailer for something and I see A24 has made it, I definitely watch it. I love like they tend to have like more diverse people making their movies, and like just in the stories themselves, they always have like a really beautiful aesthetic. I think that they work with really great cinematographers, and they really have been able to bring a lot of like indie movies forward, I think, into the limelight.
All right. I can, it sounds very you.
It is very me.
I can see why you would pick that for yourself. So I don't have a production company on here, but what I do have is some movies on here. I actually have Saw/Coraline, but if I had to pick the production company for one of those, I would pick Lakia Films. Of the Coralines, Corpse Brideses, Paranormans, Kubo and the Two Strings, those films, which I'm a pretty big fan of. So I think that might be my favorite production company.
Yeah, that is tricky. A couple years ago at the Contemporary Art Museum in Portland, I forget what it's called, but I went to an exhibition that they had of that production company, and it was so cool. They had all of the miniatures and mini documentaries about all of the making of those films, and it is really incredible. I feel that is a really good pick. I would say, I don't know, I feel like A24 is more current, I guess,
they're both coming out with films, but
yeah,
Lakia does use stop motion.
Yeah.
Claymation. I don't know if that's still the correct term to use. So it takes them a really long time to make their films.
Yeah. I feel like they both are really good at what they do.
They are. I think A24 is a bit more, I think they're a lot more susceptible to being sold out and being more focused on mainstream stuff, if that makes sense. I think I see some of that kind of corporate greed within them. I don't know if that's true. This is just a vibe that I get from seeing in some of their films. But I do feel like Lakia is kind of one of a kind. And with children's media, I think you can do a lot more weird shit in general.
I also think it's pronounced Laika.
Is it Laika?
Yeah.
Oh, well. My favorite. Can't pronounce it. What do you know? I feel like you haven't named any films that came from A24.
Well, some things from A24. Euphoria is a collaboration. It's with HBO and A24, so that's a show. I believe they also did Rami on Hulu as well. And movies from A24 are things like The Witch is one of them. They have done quite a few horror.
I fell asleep during The Witch.
Well, it's because it's quiet. You're probably tired. Some other movies from A24 would be Moonlight, Lady Bird, The Lighthouse, Hereditary, Ex Machina, Killing of the Sacred Deer, 8th Grade. What I like about them also is just the variety. It's not just they do horror or dramas or comedies. I like that you can get a little bit of different things, especially if you are into the aesthetic like I am, that moody lighting with some neon in the background. That I feel like you really get to enjoy that in multiple different settings. And I just really appreciate that they get really weird sometimes. The Killing of the Sacred Deer is one of the strangest movies I've ever seen in my life. It is by Yorgos Lanthimos, the Greek director, and it is inspired by, I believe, Antigone, the Greek tragedy. And it is so weird. And I like that they just don't care and will just go for it, which Laika does do things that are out of the box for sure, especially just by nature of the medium. But I'm not sure that they are as risk-taking, perhaps.
Probably not. They probably can't be. I'm willing to let A24 slide by only because at this point we have Cinderella Story, Avatar: The Last Airbender, Clueless, MCR, and Oron, which are all kind of children's things. So I feel like we should let one big girl thing get by.
Okay.
This is the last one. So I guess I'll go ahead and present a book. For all of my life, Harry Potter has been integral to my identity. So imagine a book that is based off of Harry Potter. It's kind of like fan fiction for Harry Potter, but it's not. And the Harry Potter analog is a cute little British boy who doesn't know how to control his magic. And the Draco analog is a vampire and they're gay. So imagine that coming out. And of course, it has a huge impact on me. I'm talking about Carry On by Rainbow Rowell as my book pick.
How would you categorize that, I guess?
It is a YA fantasy novel, but it's light fantasy. I would argue it's more contemporary.
So I think the closest thing that I have to compare to that would be Jennifer's Body, the movie, which is a teen horror movie about a girl who, unfortunately, Megan Fox, she gets a ritual performed on her, and she becomes like this like demon monster out to like eat boys, basically, to get revenge, almost in a way, of these like band members who did this ritual to her.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that sounds really good. I don't think you sold it as well as I did Carry On. I'm not gonna lie. But anytime boys are being eaten, I'm there for it. So I haven't seen Jennifer's Body, and you haven't read Carry On. But I can't have Harry Potter.
That is true. I understand that, so Ryan can have this one. As much as I love Jennifer's Body, it is not nearly what Harry Potter was to Ryan, so I can concede to that. I will just say that Jennifer's Body is really good, and I feel like kind of in its own league as far as like teen horror, specifically with women. Like, it's just very different, and it is directed by Karen Kusama, who is a woman, so that's extra shouts out for that.
Yeah, I mean, Carry On's written by Rainbow Rowell, who is a woman.
I'm just saying, in the world of like horror films, like there's not very many directed by women.
Right. Anyways, Savannah,
okay.
I would like to take a break.
All right. So within this episode, we are also going to be introducing a fun little Q&A segment.
A new segment.
Yeah, double new segments here. This one we will be continuing throughout other episodes. So for this Q&A segment, we have this lovely bingo roller. I don't know what this is called. But in here we have obviously bingo balls. And our lovely podcast associate, Carina, she came up with all these lovely Q&A questions for Ryan to answer. So we are going to randomly get a ball out of this bingo roller, and then it is assigned to a question, and we will answer that question for all of you listeners.
Wow. It's not just for me, right? It's just like,
no, we will both answer the question. We also have our questions in this lovely Tom Nook notebook as well for aesthetic purposes. Okay, all right. Ryan, would you like to?
I really would, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I absolutely would. Gotta get that ASMR.
Yeah.
I got one. Please give me question 21.
All right.
And tell me Coach's birthday.
Yes, this also lists apparently not all, some Animal Crossing's birthday.
I went on a campaign to have Coach leave my island back in the Animal Crossing days.
Yeah, no, Coach is not in here. Tom Nook's birthday, though, is May 30th, so it is coming up in a few days. All right, so back to questions. What was it, 21?
Mm-hmm.
What is your favorite vampire franchise?
You know, that's a tough question. Because as much as I love Twilight, I don't know if it's actually like my favorite or what I would be considered the best and cream of the crop. How about you? Do you have an answer right off the bat?
I think I do, and it's kind of unexpected, but I'm going to go with What We Do in the Shadows.
Wow.
I know. It's unconventional, even for me. But I love that show. I love the movie too, but like that's one of those shows. There's very few shows right now where I'm like, I need the new season. That is one of those shows. I am obsessed. It's hilarious. And I love it. I was Nadia for Halloween last year from that show.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, I do know a lot of people watch that show. I feel like I need to watch that show, but I have not watched it. One thing that I read after Twilight that I still think about to this day, kind of all the time, I follow the author on Instagram and Facebook, and I always enjoy seeing her postings. And I was with this series for quite a while because, of course, there was a spinoff and a spinoff series, and that is Vampire Academy. And there was a movie for Vampire Academy, and Savannah, I think you should watch it. Maybe we can compare Vampire Academy and Twilight together as just like those vampire teen movies that were all coming out. It was really, really not great. But Vampire Academy is about a girl who attends the Vampire Academy, as you might guess. And she falls in love with her instructor. Her instructor's 26 and she's 17. So maybe I shouldn't be fully praising the accolades of Vampire Academy, but I really loved it. I still kind of do, and I think about it probably weekly. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, okay. Well, you heard it here first, folks. I will say, for anybody curious, I'm pretty sure Ryan and I both stand vampires over werewolves, like any day of the week, twice on Sunday.
Yeah, any day.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge Anne Rice fan as well. I feel like Anne Rice also comes up. I mean, I did read quite a few of her books, but I read them as a youth. I'm talking like 12, 13. So I feel like I really didn't super understand those books as I was reading them. So I'd like to go back one day.
Yeah, I've also, like, over the past, I don't even know how many years now, have been trying to get through True Blood, which is, like, really fun of a show. Especially to go back now, like, how old it is. And Ryan and I did listen to the first book on audiobook once, which I feel like was also pretty fun at the time of listening to. So, yeah, I feel like we like vampires here. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Lots of vampires in this episode.
Yeah.
And yet, Twilight did not make it through.
No.
But Carry On did. Carry On has vampires in it.
This is going to be a strange pick, perhaps. Maybe not. We'll see. The category is favorite theatrical experience, which would be Sleep No More, which I suppose you could call a play, but I'd use the term play loosely, which, to explain, if you've never heard of Sleep No More, it is a play, air quotes, of Macbeth, like the Shakespearean Macbeth, but it is set in ambiguous times, kind of, I want to say kind of like 1920s, 50s New York-ish. But the whole deal is it's kind of like a cross between a play and a haunted house. So, like, you go to this hotel in New York and you, like,
I have heard of this.
You, like, go through the hotel and in each room, like, there's, like, actors acting out the play. They're, like, the actors also move throughout, and it's also kind of like an escape room. Like, you can, like, investigate things to try to, like, kind of figure out what's going on. And you have to wear a mask when you go in, and there's no talking. So you can't talk to anybody while you're in there. And it's like kind of spooky, kind of creepy. Like, being in that world, you truly are immersed in another world. Like, that was, like, what was most crazy to me. And I've been to things like Meow Wolf. Ryan and I went to Meow Wolf together once, where it's like a very immersive experience. This is like the most immersive experience I've ever had, because like not only are you in this world, but you're also like turned into this anonymous person with having to wear a mask and you're not allowed to talk to anybody. And it was really cool of an experience.
It sounds a little pretentious.
There is a Broad City episode about it as well, and they actually filmed it there, I'm pretty sure, which is it's kind of funny.
That is funny.
Yeah.
So I have something that's actually on my list that kind of fits the category of theatrical experience. I haven't really been to many theatrical experiences, and it's a weird category to pick, Savanah.
I just feel like this was a very, like, impactful thing that I experienced, so that's why I picked it.
But I guess the closest thing that I actually have written on my list without cheating and coming up with something else that definitely no one else has done while we've been sitting here is probably High School Musical 2.
I thought you were going to go with, like, Hamilton or something, like an actual play or musical that you like.
Nope. I was going to say Hadestown as my one that I didn't write down.
I see. Okay.
But then I decided to be real.
Okay.
With our fellow Primas.
Okay. Well, I feel like if we're thinking about what represents us just more broadly, we'd have to give it... Did you say High School Musical 2?
Mm-hmm,
yeah.
2.
I would feel like we'd have to go with High School Musical 2. Because while Sleep No More was very impactful to me, Ryan has never done that before.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like convinced. I really want to go. I really enjoy gamified experiences where I can be fully immersed in the world. That's why I like Dungeons & Dragons so much. So I'm convinced.
Yeah. I think it's just, like, not really even comparable, I guess. Like,
It's not No, nothing can compare to Sleep No More. Nothing at all. Jesus Christ can't compare.
Okay, that's, first of all, it's not what I'm saying. I did compare it to something earlier. I compared it to Meow Wolf, and I would compare it to, like, other, like, experimental theater
escape
productions.
Rooms?
Yeah, escape rooms, haunted houses. Like, it's... And that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that, like, it's like comparing, like, an apple and an orange. Like, they're just two different things. And I think if we're thinking about us and what really represents us, like, High School Musical 2 would be more so the thing that would represent both of us together. And I was actually thinking about this earlier, Ryan. I came to the realization that I like High School Musical 2 more than High School Musical 1.
Everyone recognizes High School Musical 2 as a superior film to High School Musical 1.
Well, I never discussed this with anyone.
It's kind of like Shrek. Everyone recognizes number 2 as the superior.
Okay, yeah. I didn't know. I came to this realization on my own.
Gotta watch more YouTube video essays. High School Musical 2 made it in. So I feel like I can't really go by without at least talking about one video game. So I guess you had your art experiment and I'll have my video game. My video game is going to be The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And if you're listening to this and you haven't played it yet, just please play it. It's just so meditative and wonderful. And within the first 10 minutes of that game, I had chills. It gives you the feeling of being in nature and natural exploration, and it's so weird to see a game come out and be so revolutionary but still like still be just like an open world RPG. And yet so many people are going to take Breath of the Wild and run with that formula, and it's going to have a lasting effect on video games just for forever. I mean, video games are just so young right now still, and I'm excited to see what comes next.
So I believe that my pick to compare to this, which again, I did not have a video game necessarily, I'm going to go with Twin Peaks The Return, the reboot of the original Twin Peaks that came out in 2017. Just because I feel like it was very experimental and uniquely cinematic in like a way that is very unusual for TV shows. And if you've seen the original Twin Peaks and you haven't seen The Return, it is different in that like the first iteration of Twin Peaks was very like a show. Like there was like a plot you go through, there's normal dialogue, like you know what's going on. The Return is much more like Fire Walk with Me, if you've seen the movie prior to Twin Peaks, where it's like a little bit more like, I don't know what's happening. But The Return is much more in like the current, more like a David Lynch style of just like, there's a lot of episodes where there's just no dialogue. Like you don't even know necessarily what's going on, and yet it still is like just so intriguing. And I think just to even have that exist as a television show just can allow for like so many other possibilities of what television shows could be like going forward.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a solid argument. I think the only argument that I have against it is that I haven't really heard a lot of buzz or press surrounding the Twin Peaks return, except that some people didn't like it.
Yeah, I definitely think like I could see why a lot of people wouldn't like it, especially if they're not necessarily into like David Lynch movies. Like if they just liked the original Twin Peaks, I could see why you wouldn't like it because it's very artsy, I guess you could say. But if you're into that kind of thing, like it's very surreal. Like if you know anything about like surrealist painting and how it's like a dreamscape, basically, like that is what this was like. So yeah, I could see why a lot of people wouldn't like it. I know that Breath of the Wild is like very popular. Even like in the very minimal time that I have played it, I have been very blown away just by how beautiful the game looks. So I think that Breath of the Wild should go through on our chart here, just because I can't acknowledge like how good of a game it is.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like if I knew that Twin Peaks had as much of an impact as Breath of the Wild, I would really kind of consider, but I think I can't even consider because no one talks about Twin Peaks.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be a different conversation perhaps if it was like the original Twin Peaks.
Yeah, I think it'd be a little different.
But specifically, I picked The Return just because of how you said it, like this kind of like has changed the game, I guess, which I feel like Twin Peaks The Return was able to change the game for television. Yeah.
I hope so.
I think so. I mean, I have not seen anything like that. I do believe that David Lynch is working on a Netflix series right now, but I have not seen anything like as experimental as that on TV, but at least now there's precedent.
I have seen direct Breath of the Wild clones. I'm talking to you, Genshin Impact. All right, let's go and move on to our final round that will make up our list. So I believe it is your turn to set the tone, Savannah.
I'm panicking. All right, we're going to do reality TV. as our next category, specifically like a competition style reality TV is how I'm thinking about this, at least.
Okay.
I'm not sure how Ryan will want to frame it. But for competition style reality TV, I'm going to go with the Boulet Brothers Dragula.
Wow. Well, I guess in that case, I have to do RuPaul's Drag Race, don't I?
If you feel so inclined.
All right, so I'll go ahead and make my case for RuPaul's Drag Race. Dragula could not exist without RuPaul's Drag Race. RuPaul's Drag Race is running on 16 strong seasons of well-produced television. And it is highly produced. I think that is the number one criticism that come out of RuPaul's Drag Race, is that there is a lot of manipulation behind the scenes. But it still has produced and helped a lot of authentic people have authentic careers. And it makes drag culture and gay culture palatable to people who aren't so familiar. And I just really welcome that. And I mean, it is a little bit of trash TV, I will say. It's not as, I don't feel good watching it, but I feel good loving it. I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say there. But I think RuPaul's Drag Race really did pave the way. And seasons 1 through 4, for me anyways, are kind of just as dirty and grimy. I was looking for gringy. That's not the word.
Gringy?
Dingy?
Grungy?
Grungy.
Grimy.
Seasons 1 through 3 are not as produced, and I think they hold a lot of value. I'm interested, because Dragula is still so young, where it will go and if it will one day reach kind of that same kind of polish as Drag Race.
Yeah, I will say that you are right. Like, Dragula could not be what it is today without Drag Race. I think that's just a fact. Although I do believe that the Boulet brothers tried to argue against that. I'm not so sure. But what I will say is that I do not think that Drag Race has evolved a lot. Like, I think the show knows what it is, what it needs to be popular, without really, like, changing its model. Which is fine. I mean, you think of, like, America's Next Top Model or Project Runway. Like,
Survivor.
Like, those shows are always the same. Mm-hmm. Like, and they're still popular. But what I really appreciate about Dragula is kind of like what you were saying, Ryan, how, like, Drag Race makes that culture palatable. Dragula doesn't care about making it palatable. Like, it just wants to be what it is versus trying to make it acceptable to a specific audience. And they're just, like, much more diverse. Like, they have drag kings and, like, just
drag king.
Yeah, drag king. And they have just, like, also just other, like, non-binary contestants who don't really fit the mold of either a drag queen or a drag king, and that is just acceptable. And they have not actually, like, unlike other people, have not said that they wouldn't, like, allow those types of people to perform. And I believe that RuPaul had said some questionable things about who can or who cannot be on Drag Race.
He did use the argument of having hormones would be like the equivalent to using steroids in a sporting competition. But since then, Gia Gunn and now Soleil is going to be on the most recent All-Stars, who are both trans women.
I guess I just really appreciate that Dragula is, like, it is low budget because they don't get a lot of money, and I'm assuming they don't get a lot of money because they're just willing to be more, like, radical, I guess you could say. I'm using that term loosely. Mm-hmm. But I really like that, and I like that it's also just, like, more over the top with some things. Like, their drama sequences sometimes, like, I'll admit, they're too long. Like, they go on and on and on of just, like, some, like, nonsense drama that they're, like, throwing in, but it still is just, like, fun to watch. And, like, then their challenges that they do where they have to, like, I don't know, like, shove, like, needles in their face, like, shit like that. Like, it's just, like, wild to watch. Like, to me, that has become much more entertaining than watching, I don't know what they refer to Drag Race contestants as, like, beauty queens or something along those lines. Like, to me, that's what I'm liking more, and just things that are just more, like, pushing the boundaries. And I don't really feel like RuPaul's Drag Race pushes the boundaries, although there are contestants who do try to push the boundaries. But I don't think that those ones are typically the ones who win. I also just think, like, beyond just the show, like the Boulet brothers themselves, I really appreciate, I guess, like how they just feel more real and approachable, and they like discuss more, like I just feel like they like use their platform to like talk about issues in like a more real way. Not that RuPaul doesn't do that. RuPaul is just like such a high superstar that I feel like we don't necessarily know who he is.
That's true.
Like kind of like you were saying in our last podcast, Ryan, about like Ariana Grande, like what is the persona and who is the person. I don't really feel like I know RuPaul.
Yeah, I don't either, but I'm kind of okay with that. I don't necessarily feel like I know the Boulet brothers very well. They're also just not very charismatic people in general, so I have a hard time listening to them.
I disagree, but I like their creepy vibes. Like, I'm much more into that aesthetic.
You would rather be creepy than glamorous?
I think so. Because they do glamour and creepy, Ryan. That's like their core tenets. Like, instead of like charisma, uniqueness, nerve, and talent, it's like glamour, horror, filth. Drag.
Yeah, I know that. But just like the Boulet brothers don't make up their entire show, it's also with the contestants. I think that at this point, RuPaul and all his contestants have been more public. I mean, I'm sure maybe with time, Dragula will become more mainstream and pick it up.
My question would also be is like, has RuPaul sold out?
I'm okay with that. Why can't he sell out? He's like 70. He deserves to be rich.
I'm not saying he doesn't deserve to be rich. That's fine. I more so mean like selling out the cause. Do you know what I mean? Talking about like corporate pride. Mm-hmm. And RuPaul is the spokesperson for Old Navy, Target.
Old Navy.
Yeah, which we've mentioned in a previous episode. And like, I don't know how I feel about that.
If anyone paid me enough money, I would do most things. Like be a spokesperson for Old Navy.
You could never pay me enough to be a spokesperson for Old Navy.
Wow. She said it here. I feel like people are really critical of RuPaul, and I understand why. He's done a lot of critical things.
And I will also acknowledge that I think that some of the criticism is unfounded because he is Black. Like, that is also a fact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like just because something is hardcore and grungy doesn't make it real and cool.
But you just said how, like, RuPaul Drag Race is so, like, overproduced.
It is really overproduced.
So therefore it's not real.
Yeah. But the contestants are real. Like the people that come out of Drag Race, and the Drag Race legacy is real.
Yeah. I have not watched a full season of Drag Race in a long time.
I know. I was actually going to ask you, why did you stop watching Drag Race?
Because I didn't have cable, and I'm not good at streaming things illegally. So that's why I stopped watching it. And I just watched Dracula like on a whim because I saw it on Netflix and was intrigued. So I'm not sure that we've come to any decisions.
If you wanted to introduce people to drag, say they'd never heard about it, and like you wanted to do it through like a visual medium, what would you show them? Dracula or RuPaul?
I think I would choose Dracula because it has the most variety.
It doesn't though.
That's not true. It does.
I feel like Drag Race also has pretty much the same, if not more, variety.
But
they
Drag Race
never do all-out glamour on Dracula.
But the Boulet brothers will still do like glamour looks, so you can still see that.
I guess.
And just there's the fact that Drag Race has not had a drag king on the show. Mm-hmm. Like I don't feel like I could show somebody drag without showing a drag king.
I guess that's fair. All right. I mean, I love both shows. Savannah's just kind of a hater over here, but I'll let Dragula slide by.
I'm not even a hater. Like I don't like dislike Drag Race. I just feel like, I don't know, somehow I got into a boat of like my echo chamber just being more about Dracula than Drag Race. But it doesn't need to be a competition. They can all exist.
They can all exist. No, I like both shows. I love both shows. I honestly would watch a million seasons of Dragula before Drag Race. I like it more. But I think that RuPaul's Drag Race, I wouldn't be the same person without RuPaul's Drag Race.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely, like, I have to acknowledge, like, I learned about drag because of Drag Race. Like, and I think a lot of people feel that same way. Okay, so where do we go from here, Brian?
So we have our condensed list of 10 Prima Picks that we will stand and we wholeheartedly recommend that you experience, watch, listen to. And so that's going to be Breath of the Wild, Dragula, Avatar: The Last Airbender, Clueless, My Chemical Romance's entire discography, Ouran High School Host Club, the anime, Carry On, High School Musical 2, and A24, the studio. Oh, sorry, I forgot. Cinderella Story as well.
How could you forget?
So those are the things that we most recommend as a podcast brand that you go out and listen to and spend your time with, because we love them to some degree, all of those things.
And we do want to give a honorable mention of our favorite podcasts as well.
Yes, honorable mention, since we are podcasts. We do listen to podcasts. I am a huge fan of the McElroy content of the Griffin, Travis, and Justin McElroys. I am a biggest fan of their podcast, The Adventure Zone, which is an actual D&D play podcast, and their arc called Balance. So that's their first story that they ever did. And it still brings me to tears whenever I think about it till this day.
I'm going to go with 2 picks, because if we have learned anything about me in this is that I cannot narrow things down. So my like overall pick, like if someone didn't know what podcasts were and I had to tell them to listen to one, I would tell them to listen to This American Life, just because it is like, that is the podcast of all podcasts. And it's kind of like, I guess, a slice of life. Like each episode, or sometimes a couple episodes, dives into a specific topic. Like one that like really stands out in my mind was like, they did this story on a abandoned telephone booth in Japan, and it was like after, I believe, like the most recent tsunami had happened there. Mm-hmm. And there was like this phenomenon of people just like going into this phone booth and like talking to their loved ones who had died, and just like having that be like a space for them, just to like, they weren't talking to anybody on the phone, they were just like having this phone booth be like a space for people to grieve. So those types of like investigative stories. But my second one that I would very much push out there that might be a little bit less known, it's called Unfinished Short Creek, and it's over. It was like a limited podcast series. But it's kind of more of like a true crime-ish type of documentary series, but it's specifically looking at the FLDS church here in Arizona as well as in Utah, and it's made by 2 women who one grew up like in the Mormon church and one grew up, I believe, Jewish, and one of them was from Arizona here, and like they really like went into this community to really like learn about it and try to like really show it from an objective perspective versus just being like, these people are doing things that are bad, which I consume a lot of media about like fringe religions and cults and things like that, and I've very rarely seen anybody actually take like a compassionate viewpoint like for those people there, where it really feels compassionate. Like it didn't really feel like they were doing it to like get notoriety. Mm-hmm. Like they really just wanted to talk to these people. So I would recommend that, and I believe that is produced by Witness Docs.
All right, that about wraps us up for our Prima Picks. I feel like I'm pretty happy with our top 10.
Yeah, I feel like I would like to do this again, perhaps with more of a like narrow scope, like where we're like, these are the horror movies, and we're gonna March Madness style our horror movies.
I like chaos.
Something like that.
We'll make sure to post the bracket below, or at least our top 10, and see how it goes.
If you would like to see us do this with another topic, please let us know. Also, for our Q&A segment, if you have a question you would like to ask us, please leave us a comment, DM us on Instagram, anywhere, what your question is, and we might answer it.
Thanks for sticking around. Thanks our patrons, and I love you. I'm your best friend.
Then please make sure that you like this video. If you enjoyed it, hit subscribe. If you want to watch more, rate us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever it is that you listen to us.
Bye. And they didn't include Rocket. No one likes Rocket.